get comfortable.
These are comfy chairs.
This is nice, actually.
It's a little warm up here, too.
Well, keeping it real. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I feel privileged to know you a little bit, but Index and what you built is just so cool. So I'm confident most people know bits and pieces, but why don't you tell me, I started Pontiac, that's why we're here. You started Index. Could you give us a little background on when and how it's going?
Yeah, happy to. We are definitely old. The company's been in ad tech for 20 years now, believe it or not. We had a different name for our first decade, but built Index after the rise of a little thing called RTB that maybe some of you are aware of, and programmatic. And it's just been an incredible journey. For us, we're a sell-side focused company. Our customer media companies, a bunch of you are in the room as well. We work on behalf of the publisher. We are a technology company. More than half of our headcount builds, so we love building. We love the pipes and the plumbing and the infrastructure of this market. And 20 years in, it's still as exciting as ever, and just having a lot of fun along the way.
And I agree with you on that. It's always just an exciting business. RTB is just such an interesting thing that's driven all of this now for whatever it is, 20 years.
I think we have also a shared passion or love of the pipes, like programmatic mechanics, plumbing, infrastructure. I think we definitely share that as well.
Well, yeah, it's amazing because when you look at how many people are around the business and deal with buyers and sellers, all this magic comes together millions of times a second on endpoints around the world, and I think that it's just cool. It's just an amazing. The pipes that you're talking about are literally technology pipes passing ad calls back and forth. It is. The plumbing references are reasonable.
I can't resist. So there's actually a new fun problem, which just you cued me into there. So QPS is wild. We burst to 6.5 million requests a second now, which is just unbelievable. 500 billion auctions a day. But the new challenge is bursts that happen in less than a second, in literally an instant, because of streaming. So we saw this during the debates, the VP debates, where the ad calls all came in simultaneously to the exact millisecond. So it's basically 1/1000th of a chance, 350,000 calls. And it's a whole new version. So to some degree, the market's talked about QPS and bursts per second for the longest time. We're now getting even more granular because every device wants an ad in the same instant when you're talking about live in CTV. So it's kind of a new journey of scale, too, that's just underway.
And that, I think people don't realize. Again, we both, and you travel around the world talking to these things. People like TV money is coming to programmatic. The TV linear is going to be on programmatic. But what you're saying is that's why. And I don't think people realize why. Because the linear people broadcasting the debate, I don't want to say 20 years ago, yesterday, or during the linear team can serve an ad, and they could break that ad into DMA? They could break the same ad that people are watching, the local people can serve that ad to one specific DMA, but that is negotiated over the top, big deal. But what you're saying is that when that ran, every person watching the debate got their own unique ad that they got paid for, every single unique one got a different ad, and I get it that maybe today there wasn't enough to overtake that linear spend, but if you do some basic math and every ad is sold that way, that is going to be, if they can customize every ad and get value, that's going to be way more money for the publishers than they made with the old model.
It's incredible. It's so addressable. Every one of those is an auction. They're all autonomous auctions. You can bind your data. So much of it's addressable to a deterministic identifier as well, because so much of the audience is logged in. Frequency is perfect. You can align the addressable target to a hashed audience, a hashed email address. It's so phenomenally more advanced and modern than anything you could ever have done in linear. And so the dream, the ultimate dream is why does any of this matter to the end consumer? I think the ultimate dream is better targeting, better performance, shorter commercial breaks, because the advertising is just so performant. I think right now we do have a boring plumbing infrastructure challenge because that tidal wave is just so enormous. It's a tsunami, and not much is built to handle it. A lot of the DSP infrastructure is capped. As I mentioned, we think of a second as fast. A second is fast. Imagine something that is 1,000 times more granular than a second, creating that surge now. So there's a bunch of interesting dynamics at play to ensure that we can maximize yield for publishers, because unfortunately, as exciting as it is and how easy it is to geek out with this, what is ending up happening to a large extent in CTV is some of those live spikes don't monetize great because they don't fill, because they can't always get the end bid fast enough. So we still have some work to do, but it's very exciting.
Well, I think that's kind of like if we're going to build a new technology, that's a new road for the linear TV business, which is I don't know if it starts with $1 trillion or many billion, very large business. If it's going to shift to addressable, it's understandable that the first buyers, it's going to be low. It's going to be, there's no part. You have to build it for them to come. You have to make it. Here's how we're transacting. Here's how we're going to do it. Hey, buyer, you want to do it? You got to use a DSP. Oh, you got to know how to use a DSP. You got to make sure you can actually action on all of this. But I mean, I'm sure you see how many ad opportunities there are, and you're sitting here going, "Yeah, Phil's low today." But as it continues to roll, if Phil is not low tomorrow, this business will. Again, not even talking about pipes, but just dollar for dollar be better than the last business.
And to be clear, fill in CTV generally is very high and demand is very hot. It's just in these literal instantaneous millisecond bursts where we have work to do to innovate around the challenge. There's actually a committee right now in Tech Lab working on a standard for live and CTV. And we're collaborating with a bunch of DSPs. We're collaborating with publishers as well and other SSPs as well on a standard to solve the spike. And you can kind of just imagine it as it's a very, very punishing moment. But if you bend it backwards, it's actually not a very hard problem. I mentioned 350,000 in 1 millisecond. 350,000 in our ecosystem is tiny as a number. But in an instant is enormous. But as soon as you can brace that for a 10-second duration, you're good to go. So I think very, very quickly we'll solve that problem as well. And then demand, I think, is more than satisfactory to fill everything, which is exciting. And yeah, this is just so much more superior to any other variant of television, any other variant to addressability that was ever available before with sight, sound, and motion at scale. So it's an exciting chapter in front, especially as we see more of the supply light up.
And I've been doing this. Pontiac is 8 years old. Programmatic mechanics, which is part of it, is 11 years old. And it's, milliseconds. It happens in milliseconds. But the industry doesn't move that quickly, right? It's a technology, very fast, very fast. But decisions and contracts and negotiations and changing the way a marketing department works, that might take a decade. So I think it's kind of the beauty. And you say how you manage spikes. And you're already versed in that, and that's because you started in the display and the banner world, and that's where you have to manage much more QPS. There's much more volume. I know you just were in Europe talking. You might have done it twice. I don't know. You're very impressive with the planes, but you talked to them recently about how your work on MFA and those are made for advertising sites, which are really just there to garnish as many impressions as possible. You talked about how some of that work you've done is actually helping the open internet. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, we've taken, I think, a pretty bold stance on MFA, and I do think the market is now following suit. But one thing that we think is problematic is to characterize MFA as a publisher, because to us it's not. It's very, very clear what it is. It's traffic arbitrage. It's done for the sole purpose of generating profit. But more damaging, it's affecting the economics of media because it's siphoning budgets away from real publishers. And so what we noticed in 2022 were publishers that were on the exchange in some cases for years, in other cases relatively young, seemingly out of nowhere became enormous. That does not happen often. We've been in business for 20 years. You don't just become enormous overnight. Sometimes you go viral for a day, but otherwise you don't sustain that. And so the first thing that the team, our exchange quality team, assumed was this is some new variant of fraud. We work really closely with the team at Human, and so there was a study just to figure out like what is going on here with these publishers. It concluded the traffic is human. It's not bots. It's not some new fraud scam that's off-site or in some pixel and an iframe at the bottom or whatever. These are humans viewing the ads. Everything checks out. And then it became abundantly clear these companies have just figured out the art of traffic arbitrage. They're buying real traffic cheap enough to profit with the ads in view. And they're obviously familiar enough with our ecosystem to game everything. So there's just enough ads in view that the ad load's not cluttered. They're all hitting high nines on every viewability score. They're all passing every IVT check. But if you look at the content, if you look at the websites, it's very clear that they don't care about what's going on here. And so in some of our subsequent research, what we also figured out is when you see some of those really nasty toenail ads at the bottom of websites and you click on one of them, in some cases you don't actually, unfortunately, get the toenail cream cure that you're seeking. Instead, you get to a site with cute puppies and kitties that's an MFA pub. And so they've really just gamed this whole ecosystem in just this incredible way. And so we took the business decision to say, we don't want anything to do with this. This is damaging our publishers. This is damaging the market. We should be way beyond this. Yes, it was a lot of money, but we have to be bigger. We have to be longer-term thinkers. And so we audited the entire exchange over the span of 8 waves. The last terminations occurred at the beginning of this year, and we have none of this in the exchange. But we don't make a claim at Index that we're MFA free. We've never said that. Because the other thing that I can't prevent is tomorrow from a publisher doing the exact same thing. So what we say at Index is if we find it, we terminate it. And then our general advice to the market, and especially the buy side, is we have to get off of domain blocking as being a normalized solution to this problem, because it also plays into their hand. This is a very highly organized group of companies that knows exactly how this marketplace works, and they love it when a buyer blocks their domains, because they spend $9 and they buy a new domain tomorrow, or they're even savvier and they spend $79 and they buy a domain that's 10 years old, so that they also game time duration-based blocking. And so our advice is there's a better solution to all this that I do think that buyers are leaning into now, which is when we fought ad fraud about a decade ago, we invented a standard called sellers.json, where every single exchange has to declare where the money goes. And so this is not a very, very used file. I know Chris at Jounce is very, very good in this file, but for the most part, most buyers don't use it. If you go to indexexchange.com/sellers.json, you can see the names of every company we pay. And if you do the same for Google's AdX or Magnite or PubMatic or anybody else, you can see the names of every company we all pay. And in a bid request, the origin ID of a payment is also put in the clear. I think that if we start to move the buy side to allow lists based on publisher names that are paid, we can eradicate this permanently forever. It won't matter how many domains they buy. It won't matter what new IVT trick they figure out. They literally will never be paid. And so I think, I hope for us that we get to that level of sophistication so that we never talk about this again. But yeah, we took a pretty firm stance, and it's very blatant. There's really no way for anybody to claim that they can't find this or it's difficult to find or detect. It's very obvious. It's hiding in plain sight.
Fascinating. And you, when you start saying that we want buyers to do X, Y, Z because you know what the ad calls look like, you know what's on the publisher side, I would tell you, it's tough out there on the buy side for us to get things done a little bit sometimes, not at Pontiac, but others.
Naturally.
Naturally. But there's actually another tool that has emerged that I think you've embraced that covers, can the publishers tee it up for the buyers a little bit more? Tell me about what's generally called curation. I think you use the term marketplaces, but how's that going, and how does that help push buyers towards smarter decisioning?
Yeah, curation is to some degree growing faster than 2 big trends previously. We had a lot of fun during the rise of header bidding, which was a phenomenal trend that changed the unified auction, so much so that Google tried to stop it, apparently. There's been some news about that in the last few weeks. And the rise of programmatic as well was a pretty phenomenal trend. Both of those trends, though, really took years before we even saw anything close to millions of dollars transacted. For us at Index, we launched a platform called Marketplaces in January, and the trend of curation is growing far faster than both, and I think for good reason. The supply chain is very, let's say, disorganized and challenging to navigate, and I think some really smart companies have recognized they can bring their sophistication to any buyer and meet the buyer where they are, which is at the DSP that they use. And I think it's a bit of a change in the way the market operates, whereas historically, if you had a novel solution, a novel data set, a novel approach, more often than not, it ended up being, we need your budget to become managed and moved over through an IO or whatever onto our platform. And so that sale had a lot more friction. It took a lot longer to basically fulfill. Today, if a buyer uses Pontiac or uses their own DSP seat, Curation can meet the buyer exactly where they are on the platform that they are. And so it's allowing a pace of innovation to happen that's far faster than anything we've seen before, because now your product is available to every buyer instantly. And so curation is not the term that we're using exclusively for this, because we think it's a lot bigger than curation. We're seeing companies in the data space move in this direction, whereas historically they may have been blocked in DSP roadmap to get their segments available to buyers. If they integrate their segments on the sell side, they work instantly. We had a press release yesterday with Chalice in the algorithm space, who are activating their ML models on the sell side. Again, they can meet the buyer where they are on the DSP of their choice, but do it in a really, really fast way. So I think it's an exciting step forward in innovation in the market. We don't know where this is going to go, but I think to some degree we're solving a problem on the sell side of the transaction that historically was looked at as a source of a lack of innovation over the last decade and is now rapidly accelerating. And if you kind of look at the market to this point, the sell side was really just positioned as the commoditized side of the market that was just running an auction that didn't do much, and that eventually should just be eradicated because it's adding no value, which is ironic if you kind of consider the scale challenges that we face. But if you put that aside, what's happening now, I think, is a new renaissance of innovation that was not happening on the DSP side generally, maybe in some DSPs, but not all, but is now happening rapidly. And we're both on the other side of the transaction, so it would stand to reason that we can both enrich, and it's been fun. But yeah, this is growing faster than any trend that I've seen in modern times.
You set me up too good not to take this opportunity to talk about Pontiac for 1 second, yeah. Because that innovation, that SSP is just the auction team that just makes sure it sells. The simplicity of it has changed. And you're right, obviously you're a leader in it, but that fact that the intelligence is going to go to the sell side, the data that somebody might match with these things on the sell side can be protected in a privacy compliant manner, but that would mean the DSP is not going to see it. So the DSP is really just a tool to manage your budgets and your creative and make sure it runs, which is great. That's what we do, hey. But also, that isn't all the innovation. That isn't going to have I don't want to say it's not smart, because it's smart, but maybe the tech fee on the DSP side should come down and it should be more of a management tool. So that's where we're trying to play. I don't want to say we're trying to cover the fact that there's going to be less value in the DSP, because again, we had huge value, we're really cool and all that, but it is this idea that maybe if you're handling so much of what I'm going to buy, that the tool that I use to make sure that I serve the right creative in the right geo, because that's what the buyers are so worried about, that might be, we want you to be the smartest and deserving of all that technology that you could, because the buy side, listen, some clients and the other DSPs charge large fees because they do all that decisioning, but maybe after the privacy curtain shifts, they'll be a little bit simpler. So I couldn't resist, I'm sorry.
I can't resist responding to that. I can't believe we didn't rehearse either, because both points you made are very, very cogent to what's going on in the market and certainly what's going on at Index. So there's a phrasing that we use at Index, which is we do predict over time the signal from the buy side to the sell side of the transaction is going to become more faint. And it's going to become more faint for a variety of reasons. Certainly privacy regulations and the need for consent is going to get harder and harder the farther you away are from the end consumer or the end transaction. And so it's more likely you are to be compliant the closer you are to the publisher or the end impression. If you look at platform changes that are happening across the ecosystem between Apple and Google, across Chrome and Safari and iOS, The availability of signal is also becoming increasingly redacted. The closer you are to the end transaction, the more likely you are to have access to signal. That's going to go to the absolute extreme soon. Like, the marketplace is going to start talking about a new acronym probably next year a lot. TEEs, Trusted Execution Environments. They're going to be hot in 2025.
Nice.
But it is going to increasingly put a distance between your ability to have signal and your ability to render something on device, on page, on browser. And so that part is very much in motion, and that part is very much happening, which is going to mean more decisioning is going to have to be on the sell side. The second point that you made is just very self-serving to Index as a company. Like, we put it on the website. Our vision is what we call total market efficiency. And what that really means is as much marketer budget going to working media as possible. That's what drives our company, that's what drives our thinking, that's what drives all of our bets. And I think that's part of this shift. And so as we think about things like curation, the one point that I'll make is we have not looked at curation as an opportunity to grow our fee or to take more. We've looked at curation as an opportunity to actually compress the overall cost in the supply chain, which is really good for our customers and really good for business. It's also why we made the decision that we did on MFA. I actually want to come back to that point also just to make one additional point, which is I've heard in market the reason why exchanges can't cut MFA is because they can't justify losing the revenue. We have not seen that happen at all on Index, and there's a mathematical reason why that I really hope that our competitors follow, which is every DSP is QPS constrained. So when you stop wasting QPS with massively diluted supply, you use the QPS for really good supply. And so we saw a pretty huge shift in where money went on the exchange. We were not imperiled by the decision, but if anything, publishers benefited. But that was a tangent. In short, very aligned philosophically with the idea of more marketer budget, getting to working media, certainly suiting our customers well, but also I think benefiting marketers in the auction in the form of higher win rates, because when you command more budget in the auction, you are going to win more, especially scarce audiences. So could not respond to the redirect. This is a much more pleasant redirect than what I experienced in Virginia with Google, I will say. The cross-examination was, those lights were a lot brighter.
I don't want to say it was more serious environment, but I think it was a little bit more serious environment. And thank you for all you did there to help promote our business, and not our business, but the greater ecosystem and all of that. And I think that it's so interesting when you talk about take rates and you talk about like market efficiencies, because in other businesses, I for some reason always go to our agriculture, and the cost of wheat and the cost of milk and the cost of these products change the procurement. People know it to the fourth decimal place. Like, if we're both promoting an industry and a trend towards lower tech fees, like, how can buyers not be rushing to it? It's a very difficult industry to move. It's fast in the transactions, but it's slow in its movement. It's slow in the adoption, and I don't think anybody's fault. I think that's just the nature of buyers of advertising. 50% of it works, 50% of it's very hard for the buyers to know. So it's just I like being on your side, on your team of lower fees will win. I think what I deal with my company and my team, and when, and it's tough to say.
I think it's changing, and I think buyers are pretty fed up. Like, I think MFA is a good example. Like, not only are we talking about fees being a waste of buyers' budget, but if half your budget went to MFA, what are you doing? That consumer was looking for a cream for their toenails. They didn't want to buy your car. I think the buy side and marketers in particular are more fed up than ever, and I do see like change is accelerating, and I am very optimistic that we're going to continue to move in this direction. There's also another mathematical reason why this is inevitable, which is it doesn't mean the companies that process the transactions are not going to be able to grow their businesses or grow revenue. If they simply process more, they can cost less. And I think that's a better design for ad tech business models that mimics every other parallel, whether it be the financial markets, whether it be Visa. We've been stuck in this trap of companies that just try to find a way to grow their revenue by swelling their fees and taking more, and it's been stifling, and it's absolutely punishing publishers. So I think that copying far more established industries that operate at much bigger volumes than we do is a much more sustainable future for us, and it is also inevitable.
And I think that's where we're the maturity of the business. We've been doing this a while, and it's maturing to the fact that people, I don't want to say they're remembering, but these are publishers playing an ad that a buyer is buying, and the amount of stuff that you pay for in the middle, whether it be whatever it is I think they're remembering, wait, these are public, with the buyers negotiating CTV, right? CTV goes from 12,000 display places I could put my ad to a smaller number of legitimate places. So I think that's helping promote, hey guys, you're running ads on websites, on certain domains, and why you shouldn't block them all. Do you even know what they are? And I think that's, I think it's improving. I think it is improving. This was fabulous, by the way. Very insightful. Thank you.
You're great.
You're amazing. But I will say, besides the TEE, anything else you think that's interesting for us to watch for the next? This is the last question. So what's next? What's interesting tomorrow? Anything else you can think? Artificial intelligence, is that the change? What do you think?
Well, the cookie's going away someday, one day, soon. Look, I think to a large extent, the thing to keep an eye on is what the big platforms do, because they set the rules of the road. They're ahead of all government, and that's Google, not just with Chrome, but also with Android, and that's certainly with Apple. There's changes coming to app that I don't think are fully recognized. If we get to a place where we have the Android runtime SDK, for instance, a lot of the fingerprinting that happens in app will end. If Apple follows suit, the entire app ecosystem can be reset seemingly overnight. Sandbox eventually is coming to Chrome. It's inevitable. The best thing that we can do is lean in and help influence where it goes, because soon we will have no signal in Chrome, but hopefully we will have APIs that we make better. The only other thing that I would say, and I don't mean to be doomy, but the seas of change are they're here, so just deal with it. We're going to lose the IP address too, and I think a lot of people's backup plans is, oh, there's no third-party cookie, but you can probabilistically stitch things together with first-party data, cross the web with the IP. That's all going to end next, and so I just think increasingly we do have to be very, very aware that Apple and Google in particular are setting the rules of the road fundamentally. Now, maybe the EU will step in, maybe government will step in. Otherwise, I think we just have to be very in tune with what they're doing and where they're going. And we have to work with them instead of just alienating them, because I do think, and we have seen, that we can influence where they go at least a little bit. But yeah, that to me is the most fundamental change that's upon us. And maybe it will lead to a scenario as well where parts of media are bought with different forms of addressability, who knows, the old DMA or the old zip code could become even more popular. That's also possible. It's a possible variation of the future that we're going to see.
Andrew, thank you. Thank you for the sponsorship. Thank you for being a partner of ours. And thank you for a wonderful Fireside chat. That was awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you as well. Thanks, everybody.